Mara Adelman. Mara is the Associate Professor in the Department of Communication.
I'm a professor of communication, but I teach a course called Restorative Solitude. And I was invited by the university to teach any course I ever wanted to teach. And I said, I've always wanted to teach about solitude. So I designed a course, and in part it was a Zen exercise because we understand a phenomena by studying what it isn't. But in fact, I discovered that solitude had a great deal to inform us about the nature of social relationships, the quality of life. The course has been very illuminating, and that course led me to another topic that I've become somewhat obsessed with, which is the question of distraction and what's happening. And this topic I found very compelling, particularly based on Maggie Jackson's book. She's on YouTube, and so if you only have 10 minutes, YouTuber. It's a fantastic book. She's a phenomenal writer. And so I was able to get the university to purchase this book for faculty, and actually gave a workshop for faculty. And you know, faculty, they don't go to anything unless there's a free lunch or a stipend, right? There was no free lunch, there was no stipend, and I barely got the money to cover the book, and I was giving the workshop for free. I mean, what more could you ask for? I have to tell you that within 2 hours that I sent out the email that I was going to give this workshop, saying, you know, I don't have the money yet, but I want to see what kind of interest there is, I had 48 faculty respond in 2 hours. 31 ultimately showed up for the workshop. And most of them, I think it was for self-therapy or their children. I mean, I kept all the emails. I want to write about their emails, but you know, they're dealing with their children. I said, that's another workshop. I'm dealing with students at this point. So I talk about these two courses, and I actually did a handout. I have a whole website that summarizes not only my course, but also the workshop, because we recorded all the faculty responses in the workshop. I think both websites are very informative, and they were designed so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. So there's resources there's curriculum, there's things to start such a program. You know, there's the agenda, you can do it at your university. My mission is to try to get these topics on the block, because I believe that unless they are, vacation may be a moot point. Because we're not just talking about time off, we're talking about the quality of our time and the quality of our lives. What made me really convince me about the topic of solitude is that I am a solo traveler, and I've spent 13 years traveling around the world by myself. So my proclivity is towards solo travel, and I do teach, you know, workshops and programs on solo travel and so forth, and I'm trying to be an alternative voice here on campus because I could never afford study abroad, so I'm trying to help students figure out alternative ways to travel inexpensively. But I think that the two are very much related, this notion of vacation, and particularly world travel, and this question of distraction and solitude, because we're talking about a quality of experience, a quality of renewal, a recentering of the self. And so I don't think that these topics are necessarily tangential. I think the quest of distraction and solitude are also important. I looked up in my class one day, and I noticed that everybody was involved with their cell phones or recharging. I mean, everybody in the class, because they know it's not allowed when class begins. And I suddenly realized two things with students. One is that they will never know solitude. You have to understand, that's profound, that we're looking at a generation that will never know. They will always be connected. And we are entering what Foucault calls the total panopticon. We were in a constant state of surveillance by either those around us, right, or ones that we impose upon ourselves. And I find that a very frightening state. And the fact that when young people are traveling, I mean, it was very interesting when I was teaching a board semester at sea. I just have to say that one of the big controversies, this was in '97 when I taught a course on world travel on the ship, the big controversy was whether we should have email on the ship. As you can imagine how email on a cruise like that, the ship that goes around the world, the floating university, you all know about the semester at sea, it's a floating university for 3 months, how email would redefine the travel experience. And it would take McConnell's theory of, the disjointed life and the new experience. It would question the issue of authenticity, the search for the real. And they would be tethered to their parents vis-a-vis this email. So the whole question was so interesting about technology and distraction for people on the ship was that it redefines not only the travel experience, it redefines the self. And that's why the question of solitude and distraction, I believe, are particularly critical, because it calls into question not only the self, but the experience of the self as they move in the world. And particularly in terms of world travel. I teach a course here, by the way, on cross-cultural communication. We talk a lot about why do we travel. And one of the things for young people is the sense of autonomy. The sense of self-efficacy that they experience. And now with this, the discovering of the self, right? And the kind of being away from home. Well, now as new articles on the Annals of Tourism Research are commenting on, away and home have now become synonymous. We are both away and home simultaneously. And it's beginning to redefine that whole travel experience. I'm a little bit disjointed right now. I'm just kind of going off, but I just want to conclude with, I got off the plane yesterday coming up here for this conference, and there was a banner there for this new store. Maybe some of you have seen it, the new store, and it said, work, it's about how do you travel around the world and take your work with you, and it's work without boundaries. If I've ever heard of a pun, that's the pun. And it's interesting because throughout this conference I've heard several people apologize, we don't want to sound like Luddites, and we don't want to sound anti-materialistic, and we don't want to, folks, our current culture is so value-driven. When you have things like work without boundaries, okay, it's embedded. We are a small voice. It's hard to be a Luddite today, especially with my own studies showing that students on average are using, this is on average, low level, 26 to 50 hours a week on disposable, what I call internet usage and so forth, or media communication. They're already ensconced in all of this. So any light that we bring, okay, it can't be anti-anything. It's such a small voice given the cultural wash, okay, that's happening with technology and everything else that's going on in their lives. Well, thank you, and if anyone would like the websites and so forth, please let me know. Okay.